Let's talk facts. It is ludicrous that the Jedi trusted the clone troopers so quickly. If we follow the order of events, then the very presence of the clone army is so comically suspicious that they had a death trap written all over them. First, a bounty hunter is sent to assassinate a key senator who was voting against a military creation act, and once the Jedi trace that bounty hunter, they find him on a planet that has been deleted from the Jedi archives. There, an army has been grown from the clones of this assassin, supposedly having been ordered from the Jedi by a man who has been dead for over a decade. Not long after this, the Jedi discovered that the same bounty hunter is working with Count Dooku, who has prepared a full separatist movement and a droid army to go to war with the Republic. And so we have to question the wisdom of the Jedi on their choice to trust the clone army at all, let alone so quickly. At least, that's how it appears on the surface. But like with so many other historical events in the galaxy, nothing is ever as straightforward as it all seems. So in today's Holocron, we intend to find out the reason why the Jedi trusted the clone troopers so quickly despite all of the suspicious circumstances of their creation. Greetings again, lore junkies, and welcome back to the archives. Let's answer this question by going in timeline order. The most important thing to note is that the Jedi were not blind to how problematic accepting the clone army was. The exceptional circumstances behind the creation of the clone army was troubling to them, enough so that Grandmaster Yoda took personal interest in it, wanting to see it firsthand. Meanwhile, Mace Windu took the rest of the Jedi and headed to Geonosis. What he found was that the Kamino and cloners were genuine in their impression that the army was for the Jedi. They were used to cloning private armies for warlords, as this is how they earned money and supplies to keep their society running for generations. They themselves never questioned why the Jedi would need an army, because the Kaminoans A, didn't really question the motives of their customers, and B, they didn't really know or care enough about the ways of the Jedi to consider it strange at all. They were paid by Sifo Dyas to have an army of elite troopers ready in 10 years' time, and they were completely unaware of the death of him until Kenobi informed them of it. While Yoda investigated, he sensed no deception in the Kaminoans, because at the time, the Kaminoans were fully convinced that they had been told the truth and the entire truth. The clones were also fully convinced of their duty as well. Yoda sensed this in turn. Since the moment they gained consciousness, the clone troopers had been indoctrinated that their entire purpose was to fight and to die for the Republic. According to what is spoken by the ARC Trooper Alpha 17, they had been taught about the Jedi and fully understood that they as clone commanders would be serving them. In fact, many clones already admired the Jedi long before actually meeting them. Yoda would have sensed this truth, loyalty, and admiration within every single clone trooper. But of course the time for investigation would have to wait, as events began to rapidly progress. The rescue of Geonosis went awry, and the Jedi were in deep trouble. Windu brought over 200 Jedi to the execution arena in hopes that numbers alone would be enough to force a surrender. Windu did not anticipate that Dooku would unveil a fully armed and operational battle droid army. The deaths of so many Jedi at once would have sent a disturbance in the Force that Yoda would sense clearly. On Kamino, the Grandmaster felt a deep foreboding in the Force pertaining to Windu's mission. So despite how suspicious the clone army actually was, Yoda had no choice but to take a leap of faith and load up 200,000 units of clones that were on ready for standby. Following the Battle of Geonosis, the Jedi were appreciative of the presence of the clones there. Had they not had those reinforcements, the death toll would have been catastrophic, and the Republic would have been extremely vulnerable, proven weak. Many fans seem to forget this. The issue now was that the Separatists had millions of battle droids ready for deployment, and the Republic was blindsided by a sudden war. There was no time to pull together conscripts or to call in a draft. There was no time to train Republic citizens in warfare to bolster the meager Republic judicial branch. They had a ready-made army that was already fully trained, fully equipped, and battle-ready. Not to mention loyal to the Jedi as far as any of them could sense. If they didn't authorize the use of this military, then the Republic would have been defenseless, and the Separatists would have bulldozed them. There wouldn't have been a war at all. With that said though, we found something compelling. The biggest reason we get for the Jedi claiming the clone army so quickly comes from the Legend's new Essential Chronology book. In the book it says this: while the Jedi still were not sure who had orchestrated the clone army's creation, they could not afford to wait for volunteers and conscripts to build up a standard army. And if the Separatists were involved in creating the army, as Jango Fett's dual role seemed to indicate, the Jedi wanted to prevent Dooku's forces from claiming the clones for themselves. The truth of the matter is this: the Jedi were fully aware that this could be a Separatist-created project, But from their perspective, the fact that Dooku kept it secret by deleting it from the archives meant that he didn't want the Jedi to find the clone army whatsoever. So the Council therefore decided that the clone army was indeed a separatist weapon, but one that they could claim for themselves to use during the war. They viewed this as a mistake on Dooku's behalf. The Jedi did not consider that the deception ran so much deeper, but that was the actual reason. They didn't want Dooku to add the clones to his own droid army, so they took the army first. While this seems like a very poor decision, it is worth mentioning that they were fully suspicious of the clone army. It did not escape Master Yoda's attention that Dooku himself would have had to delete Kamino out of the archives. Yoda put the pieces together rather quickly. Not long after the Battle of Geonosis, Yoda himself went to investigate the archives and found that somewhere around 33 other systems had been erased as well, including the planet of Dagobah. Because of this, the Council would launch a full investigation, reopening the cold case of Sifo Dyas' disappearance and ensuring perpetual Jedi presence on the world of Kamino. The wise and perceptive Shaak Ti was selected among the Council to be in charge of the training of the rookies and oversee the production of the cloning facilities moving forward. The Jedi Council remained concerned over the presence of the clones, and they did what they could to keep an eye on each and every one of them. Many senior members of the Council would have likely remembered Sifo Dyas and how outspoken he was about his visions of a coming war. In fact, his entire reason for resigning from his seat on the Council was because the other Masters refused to listen to his warnings about the coming shadow of the dark side. It was not terribly out of character for him to have organized an army in secret. It was problematic to the Council, of course. However, it was now done. But even Yoda said that they were blind if they could not see that the creation of the clone army right under their noses was strange. Windu suggested informing the Senate that their powers in the Force had been diminished, but Yoda disregarded this, stating that if it got out that the Jedi were weak, that their problems would only multiply. This admittance of weakness was likely another reason for the quick adoption of the clone army. The Jedi were not able to form a line of defense against the Separatists like they would have been able to do in the decades and centuries past. Geonosis proved how unprepared for battle many of the members were, and if they did not take advantage of this gift from a long-dead Jedi Master who had foreseen these events, then they would have no other option. The Jedi's acceptance of the clone army was not born of confidence, but out of desperation. Geonosis shattered centuries of illusion. For generations, the Jedi had lived in a galaxy without true war, without Sith, without campaigns that tested them as soldiers. They had become peacekeepers and negotiators. Their lightsabers were more symbolic than necessary. But when the arena on Geonosis erupted into chaos, they were cut down not as invincible guardians, but as mortals, vulnerable to blaster fire and sheer numbers. It was a humiliation that struck to the core of the Jedi. The Jedi were not only defeated, but embarrassed by the droid legions. Their weakness laid bare for all of the galaxy to see. In that moment, the Republic needed an army, and the Jedi could no longer pretend that they did not. What gave the Jedi justification was the strange origin of the clone army itself. Sifo Dyas, a Jedi who foresaw conflict through his visions, had commissioned the clones with the intent of protecting the Republic. Though later manipulated by Plagueis and Sidious, the project appeared at face value to be an act of foresight by one of their very own, not a Sith plan. From their perspective, if they did not claim this army, then Dooku and the Separatists surely would. The Jedi knew the clones had been intended for them, and to reject them would be to forfeit the only chance of preventing their annihilation. Palpatine's influence ensured that the Republic took command of the soldiers, but it was the Jedi who had no choice but to lead them. Yet beneath the surface of this logic, the Jedi understood the danger. The clones were far too perfect, far too compliant. To mask the unnatural control of the inhibitor chips, the Kaminoans manufactured personalities for each soldier. They made them genuine, real, living, sincere people. Without this disguise, the Jedi would have sensed the artificial manipulation immediately. But cloaked with individuality, the clones felt authentic, loyal. And what's extremely tragic is this wasn't an act, it was sincere on behalf of the clones. They really meant it. They really cared for the Republic and the Jedi. It was a masterstroke of Sith deception, one the Jedi had no means to pierce, especially as they were already fractured by doubt and their own stagnation. Dooku himself put it bluntly, the Jedi of the Clone Wars were weaker than their ancestors. Their strength had dulled through centuries of peace while their enemies prepared in secret. The Order had faced a harsh truth. It could not win alone. Geonosis proved that not in theory, but in blood. To refuse the clone army was to accept extinction, to embrace irrelevance of the face of war. and so the Jedi became the generals that they needed to overnight, shackled to a destiny that they did not choose, and marching willingly towards the trap that the Sith had laid centuries earlier. And this, my friends, is why the Jedi accepted the clone army so quickly. There were many small changes that could have made Order 66 preventable, but using the clones was not one of them. They were stuck between a rock and a hard place, and had to make the best with what they had. But we want to know if these are the kinds of questions you were hoping to see answered. Not every occurrence in lore is explained in detail, so if you have any burning questions, please comment them down below to give us ideas of what other kinds of videos you guys would like to see. But until next time, lore junkies, thank you so much for visiting the archives and joining us here today, and may the Force be with you.